Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Project Playbook with Concept Projects Group. Today I'm joined by our managing directors, Andy and Steve, to unpack a question we get asked all the time. Why would I hire a project manager when I could just do it myself? So guys, to kick things off, can you just briefly explain to me what project management means to you? Andy, if you want to start.
Yeah, so I think, it is a question we get asked a lot, to the point where even my kids are kind of going, Dad, what do you even do in work? What's your job? So it is a question we get asked a lot. So, by definition, a project is something that's kind of like an unusual task. So something that's not like your normal day-to-day, if you like. And project management for me is about putting a structure around that because it's not a normal activity and making it a bit more predictable in terms of outcome. So project management is defining that structure and then bringing predictability to potentially an unpredictable situation created by this project. So that's kind of simple terms how I sort of see it. And obviously that expands across all sorts of different industries, but on a high level, that's how I see project management as being defined. Now, my kids probably still wouldn't understand that. But hopefully everyone else will.
So I guess leading on to the next question, which is one that we get asked all the time, why couldn't someone just manage a project themselves? Why do people get companies like ourselves in to manage and help them with their projects?
Well, you can't. Anyone. The funny thing about that question is anyone can manage their own project, can't they? If you want to have a go.
Yeah.
How many times do you do it in your own house or, in any other walk of life? You can manage your own project if you want, but to do it well is the difference, isn't it? And to do it properly. I suppose for us in our profession, there is then an element where you have to go and do it properly because the complexities of every project and everything else. But you could manage your own project, clearly, but if you don't have the experience, if you don't have the time to do it, if you don't have the expertise, that's when it starts to become a problem, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And, I love a good example. I always love the good example of, we all talk about Grand Designs and, Kevin McLeod. He goes to all the projects at the end of the build or even mid-build, and you see the stress that managing your own build brings to the family life or whatever, as people try and do it in and amongst their own daily job. And then, we've got a budget of £1 million and, we want to do it finished by winter and all that. And Kevin McLeod goes back in the winter and it's only half built and he speaks to the owners and it's like, we're £1 million overspent and blah, blah, blah. So, people think you've got this kind of misconception that they can do it themselves and it's easy. Because actually when you think about good and bad project managers, you've got, you're sick of hearing me say this type of stuff, but there's nothing more dangerous than a kind of bad project manager because when you know the methodology and know the structure of how to do a project, you can leave parts of that structure out depending on the project. Now, if you're say a bad project manager, then you don't know what you're missing, so you're then open to all the risks that missing something like that out brings with it. So, these are the types of project managers that are dangerous. So what's worse than not having a project manager, having a bad project manager, so that's kind of...
Yeah, well, if you think about it, what's the success of a good outcome? That's what you have to define early doors, isn't it? You have to think what your success is, and most people judge it on budget and time. And as you say about, Kevin McLeod Grand Designs or whatever, they can manage their own project, but at the end of it, he always goes back. And people who haven't done it well, they need more money. They don't have the time. They haven't finished it, So, again, in answer to the question, I suppose anyone can run their own project. It's just whether you're successful, isn't it? Yeah. And if you want to be successful, that's when, like you say, if you get the right people in to do it, that's when, you start to define the success and actually achieve that success at the end of the project. Otherwise, you're just a person in the middle making phone calls, trying to organise things, but not really having the experience or the understanding of what you're doing or what should happen and when. And you clearly see it all the time. And people see it in their own lives. How many people have took on an extension build, for example, because a builder's come round and said, 20 grand is my fee. And you're thinking, well, he's not building the wall and he's not plastering and he's not painting. So you think, well, I'll phone those people myself. And then halfway through, you and your missus are sitting there thinking, what have we got into? You know, because you don't realise, you don't know when to make the phone calls. You don't know technically when things should happen. You don't know that the builder knows it's 10 grab wagons and you've accounted for one skip. So you're £2,000 over, and that's just one example of a million things, you know, and it's the same obviously for us in a bit more of a complex world, the manufacturing world and the projects we do. There's a lot more technical kind of understanding and everything around it, but actually in a holistic sense of it, that's, you know, why you don't just take on a project. If you're not confident, you don't understand, you know, and you want success at the end of it, you know, that would be why you should definitely always consider having a proper project manager, as opposed to just having a go yourself or putting people from your team, because that's another thing you do, isn't it? You know, people bring in people from the team and just say, well, they can do it, and that, you know, whilst they're doing other jobs. And again, if you don't have the time, if you don't have the experience, then it's just not the right thing to do, is it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I suppose, like, in summary, having a bad project manager, if you like, can do more damage than having no project manager at all, really, I guess.
100%. We've seen it 100 times.
And it's like this, when you think of like big projects, like well-known projects like Wembley, for example, and like how that was, let's say, was quite poorly managed. And it's, you know, other projects like that, because there wasn't the good project management team in place to do that, because I think that like went over budget and
I think it was meant to be, what was 460 million, something like that. Did it end up as about 750 million?
Yeah.
And I think it was 4 years late.
Yeah.
And again, that was a well-known one, wasn't it? You know, at the time, everyone, you know, it was in the news year on year, wasn't it? Because it took that long to finish it, you know. And again, that was through project management, wasn't it? It was.
Well, it's kind of well known. Like you know, well, I say it's well known. You know, the amount of clients we speak to and the sort of, you know, they're not convinced about why they need project managers. So you know, to your point earlier, Steve, they sort of say, oh well, we've got engineers who can do that, or we'll second an operator or a ops leader or something, whatever, someone else from in the business who they believe can do it, and then they don't understand the norms of the industry. Like, you know, when you've got a good project manager, it kind of, you know, you kind of cost overrun, if you like, is generally less than 10%. As soon as you've got somebody else doing it, typically it's 30 to 40% over. And it's the same with scope creep and stuff like that. And, you know, again, that's an underestimated part of project management, is controlling the scope creep, because not enough people spend enough time in the early phases of the project, which then results in, you know, extended time, extended budget, difficult conversations with key stakeholders and directors. And we've all been there, and it's kind of, you know, we've all seen the other side of project management where it's not done well, and before you know it, the budget's been committed, spent, and it's really difficult to recover from that point. So in summary, I think there is plenty of examples of bad project management, and, you know, we talk about Wembley, but there's also some closer to home and in the region we live, where some of the regeneration works in the local area aren't going great. I think the budget is kind of forecasted as, you know, 12 million. It's now currently running at 24.
Yeah.
Forecasted, and I believe it was allegedly 4 million overspent before they even had any construction work start. So, you know, that just shows you about the importance of having a good project manager who understands the risks, who understands
the early phase,
the importance of the scoping phase and the design phase up front. Because again, we've been in other scenarios with other clients who've asked us to get out the blocks and go, and we've actually put the brakes on and said, look, guys, we need to really spend a bit more time here now in this phase to make sure that we get it right, so that you haven't got additional spend further down the line. And it takes a little bit of guts to do that as a project manager, and I think you can be swept away as a project manager. You know, I guess a less experienced project manager or no experienced project manager, you can be swept away, and we need the timings. We need to do it now. We need to do for this budget. We need to do that. You know, and before you know it, you're being swept along into this way of work, and that is completely set up for failure. And I think that's the problem when you have bad project managers. They don't spot that, and they've not got the experience to understand that you can end up in this very, very difficult situation very, very quickly if you're not careful. So
No, but it's a good example though, isn't it? Because let's face it, no one sets out to be a bad project manager, quite frankly, do they? You know, and everyone's got the best of intention. And everyone loves a bit of a project, don't they? It's quite exciting to get into. But the example Andy gives there, anyone who comes into a project will go in AI or Google it, and it'll be about budget, timescales, quality, you know.
Yeah, like your standard metrics.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the easy bit. So then, you know, it was a great example Andy gives, because if I just look at them, I don't look at the early phases of the project and the amount of importance of the detail going into it, you know, the feasibility studies and everything else, and doing the budget on that. I just think a project is about, I've got this much money and I can't spend over that. And I've got this time and I want to do it within that. And that's the problem, isn't it? If you don't have the expertise, the experience, and the right team around you, and you manage it in that way, you are destined for failure, aren't you? Because you just, if you're just going to use those metrics, there's so many more to good project management, I suppose, is the point, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like I say, you're not being a bad project manager in yourself, it's the processes you follow. And if you don't put all the processes in and you just follow a couple of metrics, which you think is what project management is about, you are never going to succeed.
Yeah, I mean, we've you know, as far as the project's concerned, we all know we've got all the methodologies we can all follow and all that type of stuff. And as you said, AI is going to play a major and like an ever-growing, increasing part in education and educating people who think they can learn from that, from how to do projects. But actually, there's the reality of that. You know, as we do projects, we know we've got the structure, the methodologies, but also there's a load of tools and techniques there that don't apply to every single project, but there's a core of like kind of non-negotiables that you have to apply, and you have to be really kind of stringent with applying them, because otherwise you end up in a situation, as you were saying, where, you know, it's really difficult, and there's overspend, there's you know, time losses, and you've resourced it incorrectly, and then ultimately you're destined for failure, as you said. So
yeah, so I guess like every industry is different, but what would you say like are the non-negotiables?
The fundamentals of it for me is, and we touched on it earlier, is get the upfront stuff right. Make sure that from a, you know, early scope management accuracy perspective, I guess, you know, everybody's on the same page of what's being delivered. I mean, I kind of, there was a term that was given to me, you know, years ago in my career about holding up the mirror. You know, it's kind of, you know, detail out the scope, write it down, show the deliverables, and then hold it up to the clients and say, is this what you want? And because very often when you do that, your interpretation of the scope is different to what they want. And then you end up in this mess further down the line where if you don't do that, the scope is not defined, and the client is expecting something different to be delivered versus what you're expecting. And so it's really important to, you know, can you write the deliverables and the key performance indicators down on a piece of paper and show the client and say, is this what you want? Are you sure? Because very often they haven't got that level of clarity. So that's why, you know, that they're the two non-negotiables for me. Really, really clear structure in the way you're doing the day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month execution, and upfront scope definition. And spending more time in the design phase than ordinarily people would expect is proportionate to the project, because that's where all the mistakes are made if you don't do that.
And I imagine like those mistakes happen if like you just have, you know, that lack of communication with the client. I think that's probably, we would all agree that's like a non-negotiable for us, isn't it?
Definitely. I think that, as Andy says, you know, Andy talks about structure and everything else. Probably the less tangibles is exactly like you say. For me, going into a project, and as Andy, everyone's got their own kind of style of how they do it. But for me, communication is probably the biggest one. You know, it's how many times have you been so frustrated? Your project might be flying, but if you don't know, you know, if the team around you don't know, if the client you work for doesn't know, you know, again, if I take it back to the standard example, your builder's outside every day. If he doesn't come and tell you every so often what's going on, you just get frustrated, don't you? And then obviously if you go up into kind of like a commercial setting, a manufacturing setting, it's even worse when you've got, you know, teams of people around you, senior stakeholders, VPs within the business, communication is the one, and that's to that level. Obviously, there's communication with your team and the people you're working for as well. You need to communicate. Communication for me is absolutely non-negotiable. If you're not talking to people, you could be the best project manager in the world, but if you're an introvert and you don't want to talk to people, and I think what goes alongside that is also relationships as well. You know, for me, I think the first thing we talk about with our project managers, all of our team, is go and build a relationship. You know, again, if you don't have that relationship with people, you're going to struggle. You're really going to struggle because, again, it's going to start to affect your communication. It's going to affect your decisions if you're not comfortable with those relationships. So I think the other non-negotiable is build your relationships. You know, we all know it's a difficult world. It's a high-pressure environment. You know, when you've been on a project for a year, 18 months, which some of these are, you know, it can become really stressful. If you don't have those relationships, sometimes, you know, it doesn't matter how well you run the project. You know, your chances of success are much slimmer. You know, so yeah, building a relationship.
I think it's a good point. I think, you know, you know, I got a bit of advice early on in my career, which was about say a bit of advice. It was a comment really from one of the guys who used to work with, who said to me, "Andy, projects is 80% about relationships, isn't it?" And, you know, when I thought about it, I walked away and thought, it stuck with me, that comment, because it's true, it's right. You know, and I think,
definitely.
You know, let's face it, we say it all to especially our kind of more junior guys in the business, but even to the senior guys, they need to understand it as well in moments that, you know, most projects, you're going to make a mistake. You can't control absolutely every risk. You know, so
you will make mistakes.
You know, especially to your point before, Steve, about the speed of execution these days. And, you know, I remember years ago, we used to, you know, adjust a drawing on paper, and then you'd put an envelope and you'd package it off and you'd send it, you know, back to the draft.
It's showing your age.
Yeah, honestly.
I never did that. I always had computers.
I remember it. I genuinely remember it. Used to go. Honestly, he used to go back to the draftie's office years ago, and it'd take 2 weeks for the drawing to be amended. And then if it wasn't right, it'd be another 2 weeks. So projects would be like on an 18 month timeline. And but now with obviously the internet, it's like sort of transformed everything, and, you know, emails and all that.
They come out in the mid-90s. You
know? I know. But it's honestly, God's
granddad right.
God's honest truth. I remember it, and it was. But you know, I remember when we were executing projects like 12 to 18 months. There was when emails first come out, like after like about 6 months, 12 months. I remember it was called fast track projects, and that's where they started sort of then going to, you know, 9 to 12 months. And then I remember an email coming out about a year later, and it was called like turbocharging the fast track. And you go, oh my God. So it's like this then become like a 6 to 9 month project, but that's a world we're in now, isn't it?
Yeah.
We're in a, you know, it's certainly in FMCG.
Yeah.
I think the more high regulated industries are not going to be.
No, pharma and all that kind of
they're not
stuff,
going to be, you know, 6 to 9 month projects purely because of the processes. Yeah. So, but I think a lot of our FMCG projects are, you know, 3 to 9 months on average, aren't they? And you're talking major projects. You're not talking like 50 grand projects. You're talking like, you know, 10, 12, 20 million pound projects value wise. So, you know, major projects. So, you know, you're going to make a mistake, you know, circling right back, you're going to make a mistake at some point during them timescales, because everything's strained and stretched, which, you know, you come back to the, you know, earlier in the discussion, that's why you have to have a structure, you have to be organised, and you have to have a good sight of the risks around everything. So,
but essentially, what you're saying is right, that you are going to make mistakes.
Yeah,
and the point is based
back to relationships.
The point is based around relationships,
yeah.
Because you will make mistakes. You 100% will make mistakes, because as part of our job, we're problem solvers. Throughout a project, we're problem solvers. It doesn't matter if it's at the first stage and you say, actually, that design doesn't work, whatever. You know, you're making relationships. Probably the most obvious and the hardest part is during kind of installation and you know, those phases. Everyone thinks you're making mistakes, but you will always make a mistake if you can't go back to the machine supplier because you've got a good relationship.
Yeah.
If you can't talk to the electrical company or the mechanical company who are doing the infrastructure or the people who are bringing the machines and whatever, you know, if you can't go and talk to them, have a good relationship, you're going to have a problem because you don't know everything yourself. You can't solve everything yourself. I got through so many projects through having good relationships with people where I wouldn't have got through those projects without those relationships, because I could phone someone at 10 o'clock at night and say, I've got this tomorrow and I've just or whatever, or I've got this problem, can you come and fix it for me now? If I don't have good relationships, and I form that I always form that based around, because we've all seen project managers who get caught up in their own egos because they think they do have power. So what they do is they start to fundamentally treat people poorly and speak to people poorly because they have power at certain times. And one of my early things when I came in to project management, I was lucky enough. One of my first ever meetings I went into was with a project manager with architects, and the way he spoke to them was just outright rude. It was horrendous, and I actually set my stall early doors and thought I'd never speak to anyone like that because he's going to need them at some point. The moral side of talk to someone like that, which I didn't agree with, but actually, you know, you're eventually going to need people. So if you can't get on with people and you can't pick up the phone and someone will go, of course, mate, I'll help you out. I'll do you a favour. You know, I'll be there tomorrow for you. You know, if you can't have those relationships, again, I keep talking about chances of success. Your chances of success on that are slim to none, aren't they? You know, because not everything is linear. As much as Andy talks about structure and everything else and sorting out, every day will be a challenge. Every day there'll be something new. Every day there'll be something happen what you didn't really have on your radar, and you have to pivot. And if you don't have good relationships, you're snookered.
And I think them relationships are just so important. Like, obviously you talk about projects that we manage, like manufacturing, FMCG, but, you know, talking about like your house build and stuff like that, whenever you're going to get someone in to do work within your house, it's always referrals, isn't it, from other people? So it's the same kind of concept, isn't it? The fact that these manufacturers or these suppliers or whatever, they're going to say, do you know what, we had a great working relationship with Concept Projects Group, so we would definitely recommend them to manage your project. And it's just so important, isn't it?
Definitely, yeah.
And I suppose as well, like success, I suppose means different things to different clients, I guess. You know, you could probably, you know, a project can tick all the boxes, but I suppose if a client's experience is poor, then has that been a successful project? Yeah,
we've seen it countless times over the years, and it kind of links everything together a little bit, because, you know, we talk about success, and success is subjective depending on who you speak to. So, you know, the reality is that you can tick all like the kind of scope metrics and money metrics and everything, but if the relationship's been wrong, you know, come back to that. If the relationship has been wrong between the client and the project manager, then the client won't ask you to come back. And then, you know, even if you've ticked all the boxes from a execution perspective on paper, if you don't get that invite to come back, then you can't deem it a success.
But again, if it goes back to, like you say, talk about scope delivery and say that's successful, which is, you know, to an extent that is right. But actually, if you go back to what we talked about earlier of saying it's about, you know, budget timelines and things like that. Okay, you can say that's a successful project, fine. Yeah, so I have done it within budget. I have done it, you know, on a timeline. Mm-hmm. But when you think about it, you personally or the client and other people around you. So, for example, you know, you could do it in a certain set of timelines, but have you done 16 hours a day for the last 4 months? You know, so the energy you expend on that is one thing. You know, has it stressed you out to death? Yeah, you know, and that's one thing. So that's on an individual level. The other side of it then is client satisfaction. So if you had to fight people all the way along that project, if you had to fall out with people, if you had to beg, steal and borrow for things, and so, okay, so you say, okay, I've delivered it within a certain budget on a certain timeline. If that client says, yeah, but I'd never have him back again, you know, they're a lunatic, or the way they've managed it is horrendous. I've really not enjoyed the way they've managed it. You know, they haven't kept us informed, communication, things like that. The relationships were horrible. I dreaded coming into work. So obviously you've got success. And again, you know, I suppose it circles back to, you know, good project management, bad project management. Yes, you got your key metrics, but actually there's so much more that comes into it. You know, client satisfaction is absolutely huge, you know. But again, it's the time involved. You might look at the back end of a project, you've had to bring several other people more in. We've seen that in projects, haven't we?
Yeah.
You know, we've seen people talking about delivering a project on time, in budget, you know, and actually we've seen in the background the real mechanics of these projects where the client has had to put several other people on with that project manager or something like that, you know, to support them. And they're the underlying costs no one ever sees, you know. And so, again, success is so much more than just budget, timeline, you know. And I guess obviously the other one, you know, success on any project has to be kind of health and safety. We probably haven't really touched on health and safety, I suppose. But, you know, again, if you've done something within budget, within timelines, it's like, you know, the health and safety, if you've got any kind of incidents or issues, you know, that's not a successful project in my opinion.
No.
You can do the project as well as you can, you know, the best project in the world. But again, if you're not meeting health and safety kind of targets, then, you know, that's not a success in my book either.
But to your point, I guess, you know, it's as I say, subjective. Success is subjective. So, you know, all the kind of standard metrics go out my head in a sense, because, you know, your safety, quality, time, budget, all that type of stuff is a given as far as I'm concerned. The project management, and as you said, you know, actually the experience is quite important in terms of like the client's experience and your own experience, because you as a project manager, I want to enjoy the execution. And so I would deem success if I can stand back at the end of it and be proud of what we've delivered, but also if I've enjoyed it in every term, in terms of like the, you know, have we got the right level of structure in place? Have we had the right level of relationships? Has the communication been good? Is, you know, you stand back and is the project performing, is the outcome of the project performing as it was supposed to, or even exceeding it? Because that's what we try and do, right? We're trying to raise the bar every time we go into a project, and we try to exceed customer expectations and stuff like that. So, and if you do that, that for me is the success part. You know, it's kind of you have to be happy in yourself walking away. It comes back to your 16-hour days and all that type of stuff. And now we've all done them, and we all accept them at various parts in the process. But
you never did you?
Yeah, it shouldn't
you
be.
made me do.
Yeah, well, yeah.
I made me do the 16.
Yeah.
He'd phone me and tell me there's a problem. Yeah. I remember those days. He's got a short memory. He's got a long memory when it comes back to emails and stuff.
Were you doing all the weekend cover?
Actually was. Yeah. Actually was. Don't remember Andy being on any weekend ever. But we talked. I mean, to be fair, we talked there about, you know, about success and everything, and what it looks like individually. But again, concept, if you when you think back as a business now, you know, success again, probably the best thing is that client satisfaction that, you know, you get back and getting the good reviews, and the biggest one is obviously being called back to the next job and almost being in conversations. It's nice, and you know there's a success to your project and kind of what you've been doing when you include in the next project and the next project, and then people start to talk to you as the expert, as the person they're going to use, you know, and the point of reference for kind of the next projects coming up. So,
well, the irony of that whole situation really is when you and again, without covering the ground we've covered, when you complete a successful project, or when your project's going well, the project managers kind of become invisible.
Yeah,
and that in itself is a kind of a problem in the industry, because you then get this kind of feedback from clients, customers, you know, or people within the business who you work with, well, what are you actually doing? Because the project's running really well. You go, well, it's running really well because I'm doing what I'm supposed to do. Do you know what I mean? And you're just not seeing it. There's no noise, and communication's all good. So, you know, I think there's elements of that as well. And, you know,
danger there is you make it look easy, and then you start thinking, I'll get one of my teams to do it instead.
Well, where I was going to, really, if you think about it, you know, we talk about you, and it comes back to the client feedback type of discussion. But, you know, there's nothing better as business owners now. There's nothing better than getting great positive feedback for the way one of our guys or girls has executed the project. Brilliant, I love it. And that's, you know, but there's also that assumed feedback when we get the next project, and you say, okay, we want to keep, you know, Joe on for another project or whatever it might be. And if, as a project manager, if I'm given the next project, that's a show of confidence in me. So I used to take that as a compliment as well. But you never really get that verbally
No.
from clients back into us. We do on occasion. We get fed back, when we have the individual discussions about how well someone's performing or how good the project's been. But typically in projects, you'd only hear from the clients when there's a problem.
Yeah.
It's kind of, that's the irony of the
life
situation.
though, isn't it? All the time, isn't it?
People are more inclined to leave a bad review than a good one, aren't they?
Yeah,
So.
exactly. Yeah,
you good. Yeah. No one talks about you good kids. You only talk about your bad kids. It is. It's true.
So I guess then, in summary, if you just bring it back to the beginning, so why would I hire a project manager when I can just do it myself?
If you don't invest in a proper project manager, everything we've kind of talked about in the last half an hour, it will cost you money at the back end or during it. You will end up getting other people in. There will end up being a point where you will have that moment, the penny drop, where you say, I should have just got someone in to do this, because we've all done it. And it will cost you money. And at the back end, Kevin McLeod, and when he's sitting, talk to these guys. Yeah. And there's some really successful ones, by the way, isn't there? When we watch Grand Designs, they're not all, I wouldn't say failures, because we know how hard it is in the projects they take on. I don't envy them. But, those times when Kevin McLeod is sitting there, it's always the people who are trying to do another job or have come into this pretty cold who are at the back end saying, I've had to sell a second home. I've had to go and do this. I've had to go back to work for a year. And, and it shows them with tools out in the middle of the night,
Yeah.
They don't have the time. They don't have the money. For me, why would you hire a project manager in? Saves you time, saves you money, regardless. Even though it's going to cost you money to pay for that person to come in, it will save you money because they know what they're doing.
Yeah. Great. I think that's a good place to end there. Thanks for joining us. If you've got a question or a topic that you'd like us to discuss on a future episode, please feel free to get in touch. We'd love to hear from you. You can get in touch via our socials or through the website. And please don't forget to subscribe to our channels. Thank you.